Africa has a debt problem. This problem is not new and it predates the rise of China. Too many African countries owe too much money to private investors, mostly in the West. Couple that with debt owned to Western-controlled institutions like the IMF and World Bank, and we have a recipe for disaster. We will get into China later. After all, its entry into African debt markets is very recent. Since the collapse of the global economy in 2008, we have seen a rise in movements against unfettered capitalism, mostly in the West, its disregard for human lives and its dangerous pursuits of profit. Now imagine that these capitalistic vultures control 32% of African debt. If they have Westerners concerned, can you imagine what they are doing to African economy? In the US, they've commodified living itself. In Europe, they robbed the EU of close to 1 trillion euros in taxes. On the African continent, these issues are greatly multiplied since there are not even measures in place to keep these vultures from siphoning money out of the continent. Already, Africa is besieged by global companies robbing countries across the continent of $25 billion a year. Now, when you add the burden of debt on government, this issue is greatly compounded. Essentially, Africa is a free enterprise owned by large investment firms and the companies they invest in for resource extraction. Imagine institutions responsible for financing African countries also owning the businesses that monopolize the African economies themselves. These companies are independent, as such have no strong oversight in place. Over the years, though, we have seen these companies engage in bribing political officials, support despotic political regimes, and even financing armed conflict. If the African continent is to outgrow its post-colonial woes, there has to be stronger institutions in place to curtail the extractive nature of the capitalistic relationship African countries have with these capitalistic vultures. Since independence, African countries have been saddled with such unhealthy levels of debt at the hands of their European counterparts that a lot of the economies have stagnated. This unfair balance of economic control has also resulted in African governments being more accountable to their private debt holders and Western governments than they are to their own citizens. And you wonder why democratic institutions have not grown across the continent. Take countries like Botswana or the Seychelles, which are not reliant on Western debt or aid. They fare better in international economics because their leaders are more inclined to pander to the electorate, while despotic governments just have to make global investors, NGOs, and Western governments happy to keep their regimes going. What are your thoughts on Africa's debt problems? Leave your comments on what you want to see on the China side of Africa's debt problem. Remember to like, subscribe, and share.